How did the first woman to hold a seat in the United States Congress affect the United States forever? Jeannette Rankin was this woman, and many things that she did was to help women in the United States forever. Me, myself being a woman, I am thankful for what Jeannette Rankin did. She got women the right to vote, and she helped them by getting Congress to regulate hours and wages for women workers. And those were just a few things that she did to help women. Everything Jeannette Rankin did happened in 5 parts of her life. In her early life, when she held her first seat in Congress, between her terms, when she held her second seat in Congress, and her life after Congress. Jeannette Rankin did many things before she held a seat in Congress. She entered the University of Washington and joined the state suffrage organization. She traveled back and forth on the continent for 4 years, speaking and lobbying for women's right to vote. She was the force behind the organization that got Montana women the right to vote in 1914. Her getting the Montana women the right to vote in 1914, which was 6 years before the 19th Amendment was ratified. She was able to get them the right to vote because of her speaking and organization skills. 2 advantages that Jeannette Rankin had that got her elected into Congress the first time was her reputation as a suffragist and her politically well-connected brother Wellington, who financed her campaign. He helped her rally up support at train stations, street corners, potlucks, suppers on ranches, and remote one-room schoolhouses. She ended up winning the election with over 7,500 votes. What Jeannette Rankin did when she held her seat in the 65th Congress: she supported a federal women's suffrage amendment, which was a means to protect women, mothers, and children. It was also an effort to abolish prostitution near army camps. She voted against a couple of things the first time she held a seat in Congress. She voted against the declaration of war on Japan, but the U.S. ended up entering the World War I with 373 votes to enter the war and only 50 votes against it. She also voted against the Espionage Act of 1917. She sponsored a few things her first time in Congress. She sponsored a bill to allow American women who married foreign nationalists to retain their citizenship, and a bill to provide funds to educate women about venereal disease and birth control. She was the one to introduce the 19th Amendment to Congress, which was ratified in 1920. What Jeannette Rankin did between holding seats in Congress: she belonged to many groups. She belonged to the American Civil Liberties Union, she belonged to the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and the National Consumers League. During Jeannette Rankin's time as a field secretary for the National Consumers League, she lobbied Congress to pass the social welfare legislation. A few examples of this was the Shepard-Towner Act, which was an act of Congress that provided federal funding for maternity and child care, and a constitutional amendment to ban child labor. She campaigned to regulate hours and wages of women workers. She ended up touring the U.S. and giving hundreds of speeches about bills to support child labor and women's rights. Getting elected to hold a seat in the 77th Congress, she had a couple of eminent progressives endorse her. One was Senator Robert M. LaFollette, Jr. of Wisconsin, and the other was Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia of New York City. She ended up winning re-election to Congress with 54% of the votes. What she did while she held her seat in the 77th Congress: she opposed a few things when she held her seat. They were conscription, lend-lease, and the repeal of the neutrality laws. She voted against the declaration of war on Japan, and she was the only one to vote against going to war. There were 380 people that voted for, and she was the one to vote against. She believed that since as a woman she could not go to war, she was not going to send anyone else to war, so that's why she voted against the war. When she left that room, she was chased into a phone booth by an angry mob. She had to call the police while she was in the phone booth to have them escort her to her office. When she got to her office, her brother Wellington called her and told her that Montana was 100% against her. 2 days after she voted against the declaration of war on Japan, the U.S. was deciding whether or not to declare war on Germany and Italy. For that, she only voted present. What she did after she was done holding a seat in Congress: she traveled to India multiple times to study Gandhi's self-determination and his methods of nonviolent protest. When she came back from India, she led protests against the Korean War and the Vietnam War. The last time Jeannette Rankin attracted the attention of the public was in 1968 when she led the Jeannette Rankin Brigade. She attracted 5,000 feminists, pacifists, radicals, students, and others to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate against the Vietnam War. 2 of the 5,000 women who marched in the brigade was Coretta Scott King and folk singer Judy Collins. At the time of Jeannette Rankin's death, she considered re-election for Congress for the third time, but because of issues she had with her throat and heart ailments, they ended up forcing her not to. Jeannette Rankin changed the world for women forever. She gave us the choice on if we wanted to vote or not, and her life happened in 5 parts. It happened in her early life, the first time she held a seat in Congress, between terms, the second time she held a seat in Congress, and her life after Congress. Jeannette Rankin was more than someone who was fighting for women's suffrage. She wanted the world to come to peace and not go to war. She was a pacifist who believed that the U.S. should not have been involved in either of the world wars, and she said, "You can no more win a war than you can win an earthquake." Thank you.